We got JLB. JLB, thanks for joining us today.
Of course.
I guess, first of all, tell us what JLB stands for and your title.
Well, my name is John LeBaron, and my title is Chief Revenue Officer. And
Nice.
JLB, I guess,
Cool.
doesn't even make sense. I mean, I don't have, my middle initial is C, but somehow LeBaron, since it has two capital letters, has an L and a B.
Yeah,
So
JLB flows really
cool.
nice.
There we go.
We'll get into all things pattern, but like before that, I kind of want to get into you as just a human being. So I guess let's start early. Where are you from? And then what did you want to be when you were a little kid? And maybe let's see if there's some synergies to what you're doing now and to, what you wanted to be as a child.
So I grew up in Salt Lake City. I am the fourth of 8 kids. So classic middle child, always forgotten, always clamoring for attention, all that fun stuff. I wanted to be a brain surgeon when I was little. And realized that I actually have a super weak stomach. So, among other things, I don't know how much e-commerce has to do with brain surgery. Nobody dies if we mess up our job. That's the good news. And I think it's slightly less complicated. So, yeah.
Cool. And then, so tell us a little bit about your kind of path to becoming the CRO of Pattern. What were you doing before this? And were you always in a revenue driving position? Were you always in sales?
No, I've never been in sales, actually. So I grew up, my dad ran an ad agency for 30 years, and I kind of followed in those footsteps. Didn't work for him, but I went and did an advertising degree and worked in a lot of different big creative agencies. I was a creative copywriter actually for many years. Cool. Worked for publicists, worked in radio, worked in TV, worked in, websites when the web was actually somewhat nascent, in digital marketing and stuff like that. And so, it was super, super exciting. After starting my own company and running it for a couple of years, I got into a company that was doing a lot of predictive modeling and a lot of statistical work. And I realized at that moment that I didn't know anything actually about real marketing. I owned a marketing consulting firm, but it was really like a Marcom consulting firm. I was doing a lot of, lease renewal programs and a lot of like new vehicle launches and stuff like that as part of my, one of my clients. And what I realized is I didn't know how to do pricing. I didn't know how to do segmentation. I didn't even know how to do a regression analysis. And so a lot of what I would call quantitative marketing, I didn't know how to do. I went and got an MBA at one of the best schools in the world, actually the best school in the world in marketing. And
where's that?
Learned a ton. It's Kellogg School of Management. It's in Chicago.
Nice.
And learned a ton and got my butt handed to me in terms of the course load work and a lot of just mathematics and statistics and a lot of that sort of stuff. But it taught me a ton. From there, my plan was just to go back into advertising and ended up getting super infatuated with tech and especially B2B marketing. And so I went and worked with a number of different companies in Silicon Valley in B2B marketing. And then I got an email or a LinkedIn message out of the blue from this company called iServe based in Utah. This is 2018. And anyway, I ignored it. And then the CEO called my cell phone. I don't know where he found the cell phone. And anyway, long story short, I came over as the first marketer at this company called iServe. And it was really, really exciting for me because the company was already doing great things. The company was growing very, very fast. The company had a solid trajectory. It had a great product, but no one was telling that story. No one was really telling the market all of the great stuff that this company was doing for its brands. And so I just thought if I get to be the steward of that voice, of that story, of that narrative into the market, that's a really, really special thing. And so I came here as the first marketer. About 8 months later, the CEO of my boss said, "Hey, I want you to take on sales too." And I said, "That's a really dumb idea. I've never done sales, and so I'll probably screw it up." But he said, "I think you might screw it up, but you might make it work." And so I guess I've kind of started to make it work after 7 years. So that's how I came here. It's been an absolute blast. And I've been very blessed to work with a ton of people. Very, very smart salespeople who have spent their full career here, and they've been good mentors to me in this role.
I love that. Can you pinpoint a defining moment in your career? like something that was kind of a cornerstone where you either saw personally or with like, Pattern or iServe, like a defining moment where you really felt like, oh, we caught some wind here and things are starting to change in like the right direction?
Yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of different defining moments. I would say, for me personally, when I was in Chicago, I had this real desire to get deeper into quantitative marketing. That's actually what drove me to the thing. And so I wanted to do an internship in consumer packaged goods, and I wanted to be a brand manager because brand managers own a full P&L. They do marketing, but they actually own a full profit and kind of loss piece of the business. They're like a mini CEO. And I did a ton of research in that space to found out I wanted to go to Johnson & Johnson. I got the internship opportunity to go to Skillman, New Jersey, to be a brand manager for Johnson & Johnson. And at the same time, I got an internship to join Apple in Cupertino. And so, and that was a time Steve Jobs was still at the company, and
No way.
Scott Forstall and Tim Cook and Johnny Ive, and so they were about to launch the iPad. This was back in 2010. And I just had this massive internal dilemma of like, wait, I thought my life was going to go in one way and I'm being pulled and this is super exciting. And so I just spent a ton of time thinking about it. Well, long story short, it just ended up being, I ended up going to Apple. It ended up being completely transformed the way I thought. It was very exciting. It was fast paced. It was moving. And I think for me, my personality thrives on that constant change, on that ambiguity, on like a bunch of that innovation and things happening and changing all the time. And so I would say that set me on a completely different trajectory and course for my career. It's been a huge blessing. And then I would say like a turning point for Pattern is kind of in that same realm. Like pretty early on, we realized, hey, if we're going to be, the thing that got me to iServe was our CEO telling me, looking me in the eyes saying, I want to be $1 billion company in 5 years. At that time, they had just barely closed $110 million in revenue. And so it was not a foregone conclusion. And I just thought, okay, this is crazy. There's no way you're going to be $1 billion company. You're like you're in like a warehouse in Lehi, Utah. No one's ever even heard of you.
Right.
And he said, how much revenue do you think Samsonite did last year on Amazon? And I said, I have no idea, and I guarantee whatever number you tell me is going to blow my mind. And he said, over $100 million. So he said, we only need 10 customers,
Wow.
10 Samsonites to be $1 billion company. And I said, okay, I'm listening. So that changed the way for me, the way I thought about this business, the way I thought about this opportunity, everything there. And shortly thereafter, we said, we need to rename this company. Because iServe isn't really going to do it. If you really are going to be, and if we're really going to be a multi-billion dollar company, then we need to step into this market. We need to actually have a name that talks about what it is that we do, which was very data centric. It was about recognizing pattern. It was about capitalizing on patterns in the marketplace. It was, this was before even AI really kind of had its lift in the market. It was back in 2018. And so I think that set us on a really different trajectory. I think introducing the e-commerce, kind of acceleration category put us on a different trajectory. And the cool thing is, as I said before, what got me super intoxicated about making the change in my career, all the change, all the innovation, the pace, the feverish pace of improvement and difference that's happening in the market is the same thing that gets me super excited about coming to work every day at Pattern. Pattern is a different company every single year because the market is a different place every single year. You're dealing with tariffs, you're dealing with the rise of social commerce, you're dealing with rapid international expansion, you're dealing with marketplaces eating the world, you're talking about the shift from brick and mortar. So there are all these different things that are happening, and it makes me feel like every day is a different job and a different day in a very, very complex and very provocative type of environment.
Totally. So another question. How about two-pronged question. Who is like someone that you can point to that has been like a mentor or has given you the best advice around, throughout your career, that maybe they're at Pattern or maybe they're, somewhere before? And then also in terms of like media, is there a podcast or a book or something that you've consumed that has really has really made an impact on you as a career at Pattern?
Yeah. I mean, the list is very, very long. The best part of working at Pattern is you're just working with incredibly brilliant, smart people that are changing the way that you think about everything. And so, for sure, I've had 3 bosses in the last 14 years, right? And one of those bosses was only for 1 year. So really, I've had 2 of my bosses I've had for 13 years. And the reason why that matters is because the person that I think has the biggest outsized impact on your job satisfaction is your direct manager. It's the person that you work for. They can lift you up. They can obviously promote you. They kind of hold the keys on that, but they can also, affect your happiness in terms of the decisions that they make have an absolute direct impact on not only on you, but on the downstream impact for the team that you manage. And I joke so many times that our CEO has had so many opportunities in the last 7 years to break my heart, and he never has. And so, I remember, interviewing with him, and when I took the job, I just said, listen, I am giving you the very best years of my career. Okay? Like, this is unequivocally, I am in a spot to contribute, and I will make you fantastically wealthy, as part of something that you're trying to build, because I believe in you and I believe in what we're trying to do. But if there ever comes a moment in which you cross me or you do something that I don't believe in as a human being, I don't care what title you give me. I don't care how much money you pay me. I don't care what RSUs or stock options you give me. I'm out of here, because my life is too short to be messing around with people that I don't want to emulate, that I don't want to be like, that I don't want to truly support, right? I don't have a dream of my own to go build this company, some company. So I'm going to go build your dream with you. And he's just been incredible that way. We don't always agree. We don't always land on the same spot. But there have been multiple times that honestly almost get me emotional thinking about it, where he has said, I don't agree with you, but I can tell how much this means to you. And I feel compelled when something means this much to someone to lean in and at least listen to kind of what they have to say, even if I don't agree. And so, Dave, our CEO, has been fantastic. Our other co-founder, Melanie, I don't report to her directly, but she's been absolutely fantastic. She's been there all along the way as well. And my last boss before I came here, I worked for him for 2 different companies, same sort of thing. I wanted to be like him. I felt like he was charging and leading the pace in terms of leadership, in terms of, helping lift people up and doing right by others. And so I certainly don't feel like I've fulfilled that measure yet or lived up to that standard. But it's been a phenomenal thing. And I would say for anyone else listening out there, choose very wisely the person that you report to and that you want to work for, because they will have an outsized impact on the satisfaction that you have in your job.
Totally. I mean, I've worked with Trig or for Trig for now almost 10 years now. And I was just yep, I like this guy. He's honest. He's really hardworking. And I don't want to disappoint this guy. And it just makes a world of a difference when you have so much respect for the person that you're working for, because it turns into it's obviously you want the company to do well, but you don't want to let down the person that it's your boy, you're you don't want to let down your buddy. So cool. I guess we have to get into tariffs. I was told I had to ask a question about tariffs. Seems like a hot topic, tariffs and creatine. Everybody's talking about it. What are your thoughts, or what are our thoughts as a company on tariffs, and how are they impacting our business?
Yeah, I don't claim to speak for the company on this, but certainly tariffs are here. I don't think they're going away. I think they are a part of trying to rectify the trade imbalance that we have. And I think, President Trump has gone very, very hard and aggressively at this thing. And I don't know totally where it will land. Nobody knows where it will land. But I think we do have to assume that there are going to be a number of tariffs. And I think it's been encouraging to see the swift response from a number of major manufacturers, Apple included, that are trying to figure out how to reduce our dependency on China and manufacturing in China specifically. And so I think it is starting all the right conversations. It is starting all the right behavior. It is having crazy impact. And I do not want to downplay the repercussions that it is having, not only on the brands themselves that are manufacturing, but the overall travel budgets are being affected. Sourcing is being affected. There's just a bunch of fits and starts related to, cross-border and cross-Atlantic trade even in terms of container. And so I think we are setting ourselves up for a second kind of bullwhip effect that we had and experienced during COVID, because, freight forwarders and carriers and ocean liners and all that other, they don't know what to do with this uncertainty yet. And the stock market obviously has the highest volatility since COVID, and before that, really probably since the financial crisis of 2008, 2009. So it is a very complex, tricky, volatile thing that we're spending hours every day kind of looking into and working on. But so far, I don't think we've seen the worst of it. So that's what I'll say.
Cool. All right. So then last question, because we're just at time. What are your predictions? Obviously, we can't tell the future, but what are your predictions and trends you're seeing in e-commerce in general, maybe social commerce too? And where do you see Pattern 1 year from now? But then where do you also see Pattern 10 years from now?
Yeah, the interesting thing is where Pattern ends up, largely we don't totally control, because there's so many other forces at play that will ultimately start to affect how well Pattern succeeds, right? But at a very high level, I would say, there are basically a bunch of retail purchases being made across the world. Predominantly or traditionally, that was done in brick and mortar. We know that number, there's a mass exodus from brick and mortar toward digital channels. We are beneficiaries of that. Amazon is beneficiaries of that. So that is probably the first thing, right? And so this kind of migration of, call it a 1% of GMV moving across, maybe 2% of GMV on a crazy year, moving out of brick and mortar toward these digital channels, that's a thing. Those are moving toward, basically D2C fulfillment or Shopify type of stores, as well as marketplaces. Marketplaces are growing about twice as fast, depending on the category in the country and the region that you look at. And so largely there will be tailwinds in e-commerce and specifically in marketplaces for decades to come. And again, Pattern will be a beneficiary of that. As you look to some of the trade or the winds of change that are happening in those marketplaces, a handful of things are starting to kind of become clear. China is flattening out. They used to be the hottest, biggest, most penetrated country in the world. That is starting to peter out and get a little bit flatter. The other thing that you're starting to see is the rise of social commerce. So the biggest growth in China is not coming from, Alibaba and JD and some of these other folks. They're coming from emergent players, and they're also coming from social commerce. So ByteDance has two kind of child companies, TikTok and Douyin. And both of those are growing very, very fast. And so those are some of the kind of things that we're seeing happen from a trend perspective in the marketplace. Where Pattern is, I would say in 1 year, will largely be on a great growth trajectory, call it 30+% of growth, just because we continue to use AI and data and a lot of natural language processing and machine learning to give our brands an outsized competitive advantage as it relates to performance on these marketplaces. So I would see that, barring massive, implications of the tariff issue, I would see that continuing to kind of grow. The second thing that I will say is, as we aggregate more data, as we gain this competitive advantage, as we gain more scale, there will be new products and services that we start to offer, from fulfillment services to consulting services to software as a service. And I would say that as we build this kind of long-term durable platform, no one else is incentivized to build the ultimate kind of marketplace operating system, the Shopify of marketplaces, because it's just too complex and it's too tricky. But because Pattern has this massive services arm, because we have this prowess on the technology side, and because we have so much data, I would say, maybe this is 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but I expect Pattern to actually own all of the infrastructure, all of the connective tissue that sits as a thin layer across all marketplaces, trillions of dollars ultimately around the world, and having other brands and partners and other competitors, honestly, ask if they can build on this ubiquitous platform that we have built to execute at scale through all regions, through all countries, across all marketplaces. And so I think it's super exciting. It's not unlike the challenge that other people have built. You have the AT&Ts and the Verizons and the British telecoms building global infrastructure to kind of service the internet and all telephony across the world. You look at other, big companies like Apple and Google, who have built the infrastructure, the OS for mobile computing. You have AWS building the infrastructure around the world, and Azure and Google Cloud Platform building this massive platform around the world for public cloud infrastructure. This is no different. Someone has to go lay that groundwork and allow other people on top of that infrastructure, and I don't think anyone's better positioned than Pattern to do that.
Boom. Mic drop. I love it. Thank you so much, JLB. That was perfect. It's exactly
Awesome.
what we needed.
Sounds
Cool.
good.
Thanks so much, dude. Really appreciate it.
Of course.